Podcast at Ground Zero is presented to you by the Apocalypse. Because without the Apocalypse we wouldn't be doing this show.
Greetings, friends of the Apocalypse. This is Podcast at Ground Zero, your home for the Apocalypse for episode 84, Gamma World Inspirations. I am the Apocalypse Nerd. He is Adam Bomb Clancy. Welcome to the Wastelands. All right, folks, we got another episode coming at you right now. So this episode was inspired by Mr. Glancy because we were having a conversation that he was like, I'm looking for Gamma World inspirations. And he's been posting on some Gamma World groups about Gamma World inspirations. And we started having a conversation, and about 20 minutes into the conversation, I said, you know what? We need to be recording this. So
yeah, that's pretty much this is we are wasting a podcast.
You're wasting a podcast. I'm like, shut up, save it for the show. So we're going to talk about Gamma World inspirations. Mainly it's kind of let's talk about different books that were inspirations, but there's movies and TV shows as well. We're just going to kind of talk about, because anyway, we like talking about Gamma World. And we're going to talk about different books and movies we've seen, mainly a lot of books that we find inspiring for Gamma World material.
And I want to say that Gamma World is a different kind of apocalypse, all right? We've talked about it in the past. It's a classic old role-playing game that came out right after Dungeons & Dragons. I think it was published in 77. And it's a
78.
Yep, it is. Pardon me. It is an apocalypse that is set in the future. That is, things don't blow up in 1997. You know, back in the 80s, everything was going to go wrong in 1997, always. It's a apocalypse that happens generations in the future. So we have all kinds of high-tech stuff that we don't have today. Laser rifles, powered armor, atomic-powered cars, the works.
I think it starts in like 23, 22. So it's like a couple hundred years in our future.
Yes, that's where Gamma World starts. But I'm also going to include the things that are related to that, or things blew up in the future is an element of Gamma World. So that there's technology, the lost technology is higher than technology that we're working around with today, right? That's one of the things that goes on.
Oh yeah, well,
robots are a thing,
laser guns.
It's like somebody nuked the Jetsons, right? I think that's not an unfair description. Somebody nuked the Jetsons.
Well, there is a theory that the Jetsons and the Flintstones are happening at the same time. You ever seen that theory?
Yes, because the Flintstones are on the ground beneath those floating cities. Yes, absolutely. I think there's something to this.
I buy it.
I buy it. I don't think I think there's more to this. We could explore more, but it has to be kind of in the future. There kind of has to be super science. There has to be kind of weird mutants. Radiation can't just give you bone cancer and you die. Okay, that's no fun. Radiation has
bleeding gums, diarrhea, vomiting. No,
that's not the radiation we want for this future. This radiation has to deliver, acromegaly and hydrocephaly, sure. So you can have lots of cleft palates on the mutants. But what we're really aiming for is something, where the mutants end up with powers. And we're going to go into some, either they can spit acid, they've got multiple limbs, they've got psychic abilities, whatever. That's what we're looking for mutants.
Well, yeah, and it's science fantasy. It's not science fiction.
Absolutely.
Because it's not hard science. It's science fantasy, and they clearly have called the game science fantasy from the beginning. And, it's fantastical, a lot of it, whereas, some of it seems like magic, and, it's a lot of people it's been called, and I've got this argument to people that it's like it's considered very Wahoo because it's very, or not
Gonzo.
Wahoo and Gonzo, and some people, it's like, but it doesn't have to necessarily be like that. I mean, that's a lot of people's interpretation, and if you played it right from the book like that, I could see it's like, yeah, it's a bit Gonzo, because
And certainly
giant rabbits turning metal into rubber and all that shit. It's like, yeah, it's a bit Gonzo.
But we're going to talk about some stuff, some inspirations, things that are related to this that definitely are a bit gonzo. And in his opening to Gamma World, and it was published in 1978 by TSR, but written in 1977 on September 16th, James Ward wrote this, and Gary Jaquette wrote this introduction to the book, and they mentioned some things that inspired them back then. That inspired them for this kind of a post-apocalyptic story. And the four things they mentioned were Brian Aldiss's novel, The Long Afternoon of Earth, Andre Norton's novel, Starman's Son, or Daybreak 2250 AD. It's got under both titles. Sterling Lanier's book, Hero's Journey. And finally, Ralph Bakshire's animated movie, Wizards. Are there four things they describe, sort of as their inspiration for Gamma World. Now, between the two of us, we're familiar with all four of these.
Yes.
But I have not read The Long Afternoon of Earth by Brian Aldiss. I know he also wrote Starship, which has some connections to Metamorphosis Alpha, but I haven't read that either. So what can you tell us about Long Afternoon of Earth?
Besides that, it's not good.
I understand that spiders have apparently woven a web from the Earth to the moon, or is it plants grew from the Earth to the moon? I can't remember.
Plants. Okay, now mind you, I read this book close to 40 years ago, maybe 35, 91, probably 38 years ago. I mean, I read it once. It's not a big book. It's not very big. A lot of people say, it's a Hugo Award winning and nominated, but I was reading a lot of post-apocalyptic stuff at that time because it was probably 83, 84. I read a lot of it, and I just didn't enjoy it. Yeah, it's like humans are I don't know if the humans are smaller. I think the humans were smaller. I think they evolved to be smaller.
That's what's happened in Starship.
Yeah,
as well.
Well,
I don't know.
Well, they evolved to be smaller because of predatory animals to be safer. So humans are a little bit smaller, but then everything else is fucking gigantic. Trees are miles tall, miles, and
insects are the size of buses
or bigger because I think they ride on a spider that climbs on their spider web and they go to the moon or something like that. It's really, I don't remember. That's about all the details I remember because it's billions of years in the future. I read it once a long time ago, and when I read it back then, I just remember not enjoying it. Some people like it. They say it's a great book, and you know what? That's fine. But for me, my personal opinion was I did not enjoy it.
I have not read it, and what I read when I read up about it online, when I read somebody's review online, I looked at the Wikipedia. Yeah, it's a world where humans. I wonder what James Ward and Gary Jaquette took from it. Was it just the idea that humans are no longer the dominant species, and that we are? If you go out into this world, you are the prey of all kinds of other creatures that will just gobble you up like fresh fucking strawberry, and that's the end of you. I mean, that aspect is very Gamma World, where the environment is super hostile to humans.
Maybe.
But from what I can tell, there's no hint of lost technology. There's no hint of human mutations, just weird animal evolution, where plants and insects are the dominant species on Earth. And that's all I know about Aldiss's book, and so I guess we'll have to leave it at that. But the next one, Daybreak 2250. Oh, go ahead.
Before we get into those, just before I forget, is before we go with the rest of the books, I want to interject that one of the things I forgot to mention, and then we'll circle back to it, is in the last show that Thundar the Barbarian, which we'll talk about as an influence for Gamma World, or at least you're not for the creation of the game itself, but people's inspirations.
Yes.
it had originally gotten a release in DVD, but it was kind of like, print on demand DVDs, like 10 years ago with Warner Brother Archives. They are actually releasing a Blu-ray version of it. And then from everything that I've read, it has been remastered to 1080p. And a lot of people said, like, well, how much better can you get a cartoon from 1980? And people made some good examples that there was a lot of shows that Warner Brother has done that to. Like, there's a bunch of other shows from that period. I can't remember which ones, but they were ticking them off, and they're like, yeah, they've redone these, and they look a lot better. So, of course, I'm going to be forced to, after 10 years, to buy it again because it'll be on Blu-ray because it'll be a better looking picture. So
on Blu-ray, you're going to have to.
I have to. I mean, shit. I bought The Prisoner. I bought that. Let's see. I had it originally on VHS, which I had on VHS, which I'd gotten from my local video store, probably a Blockbuster, because sometimes they sell off videos that don't sell. So I had it. I had it on VHS. I think did I buy it a second time on VHS?
Well, did you wear the tapes out?
No, or I wonder if they came out with an official print. No, I don't think they ever came out with official printing of it, but they came out with a DVD set, and that's twice, and then they issued the DVD set a second time in slimmer cases, so I got it again. Then they issued it on Blu-ray, but then they did another Blu-ray edition a couple of years ago, which was a completely remastered because the previous Blu-ray wasn't really remaster, but they did a remaster of it, and I bought that. So I bought The Prisoner like 5 times, but the final one was this remastered edition of it, and it looks fan-fucking-tastic from a TV show from the fucking 60s. So just because it's old...
it's not the last time, dude. They're going to come up with a powdered version. You have to snort like a line of cocaine. You're going to buy it. It's going to be nanites in your brain.
That's fine. So anyway, Thunder the Barbarian is coming out on Blu-ray, I think, in April. So if you've never gotten it, you'll be able to get it. And it looks like it's going for pre-orders for like $25 for the
That's not bad for a full season.
For the whole full season. So anyway, we'll talk about Thunder some more, but I wanted to interject that before I forgot that. So Moving on to the next book of the 4 that inspired Gamma World.
Yeah, Andre Norton was a writer it's a woman who actually wrote under a man's name back in the 50s and 60s because, people wouldn't open a goddamn science fiction novel if a woman's name was on it. So she wrote under a pseudonym that was sort of androgynous, but as opposed to Andrea Norton. But anyways, she wrote 2 very good post-apocalyptic novels. One is mentioned by Ward and Jacquet, and that is Starman's Son, or Daybreak 2250, where we are, again, hundreds of years. The apocalypse happened in the future, and we're now hundreds of years after the apocalypse. That's kind of one of the big things, is that the apocalypse itself, the end of civilization, is distant, and then the people who are wandering around after this apocalypse don't remember what television is. They're multiple generations down the road, so that the time of technology is these are like myths of the gods. It is something dimly remembered only in stories. And that is all over the character of Fours, the Starman, or rather the son of a Starman. They get around to explaining who the Starmen are, but they are a tribe that seeks out places of the ancients that are able to be excavated for all the goodies and all the goodies of the past. And our hero is a mutant who has some superpowered eyes and some superpowered hearing and some white blonde hair because of his mutations, and has a giant cougar-sized Siamese mutant cat that is his sort of his bosom companion, his sidekick, his Sancho Panza, his Tonto, whatever you want to call it. His right-hand guy is a giant cougar-sized Siamese cat that he goes out and explores the wasteland with. And this thing it's got horrible, creepy mutants that live under the sewers in the cities, the beast things, who are definitely they've got some superpowers, and that they can track you by scent, and they're extra strong, and they're kind of nasty. And there's that weird colony of intelligent lizards that destroy there's a sequence in the book where there's a hive colony of intelligent lizards that have evolved out in the desert in the radiation areas, and they work as a group, but with sort of organized, and so there's that kind of mutations in this far distant future. So
and I'm going to take your word on it, because again, I read that 35 plus years ago. So some of the things you're talking about, I'm like, okay, yeah, I remember that, but a lot of it I don't, because again, I read it so long ago, and I read so many books since then,
And it's definitely got this thing where the tribes all have these myths about where they evolved from. The Starmen turn out to be the survivors from a NASA facility.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
They're from a NASA spaceflight facility, and the tribe of there's the Plainsmen who very much act like American Indians. They act like the Sioux or the Cheyenne.
Let's not give them the entire book. Yeah.
True, but there's another clan that's descended from Air Force pilots who were forced to ditch their plane. So that's a very Gamma World touch as well. The next one that they mention in that list is Sterling O'Neill.
Well, before we talk about
Sterling.
For Sterling, let's talk about the other Andre Norton book.
This is one that Jared thrust into my hands, probably in that bookshop in Jacksonville.
Yep, we were in Jacksonville. There was a Chamberlain's Book Mine, big bookstore, used bookstore, and I'd come across this book a number of it's one of these books is like, oh my God, how did I not know this existed? I probably came across it like 5 or 6 years ago. Maybe a little bit more, but all of a sudden when we were in this bookstore, I was looking at the Andre Norton section. I'm like, oh my God, they have like 5-6 copies of this, and I'd never seen or heard of it before then, but it's called not Starman's. I'm sorry. No Night Without Stars.
Yeah. No Night Without Stars. I just finished it up a couple days ago. In fact, boy, this one has definitely got the Gamma World stink on it.
Oh my God.
Way in the future. The apocalypse blew up a society that had robots, artificial intelligence complexes, laser weapons, sonic weapons. I mean, whatever world got blown up, they blew up Buck Rogers. Okay. And the story's got, our hero has his giant horse-sized coyote that he rides around on and uses as a pack animal, right?
Yep. That's Gamma World right there.
And the woman who's his companion in it.
Doesn't she have some kind of powers?
Oh, yeah. She's got psychic powers out the yin-yang. She's got a number of psychic abilities where she can communicate with animals. She uses her psychic abilities to scare people off. Yeah, she's got some psychic abilities. So she's got her mental mutations, right?
And what sold me on this book to tell me that was very Gamma World is, because again, let's not dump everything out of the story, but it's got a crazy fucking cybernetic installation.
Yes, it does. And it's also got crazy misshapen mutants, because there's a mutant that stalks them in the ruins of the city that is got, that's like 10 feet tall and has a horn growing out of its head, and is coming to club them with a parking meter, it's got all the things you want from a Gamma World mutant. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's that book. I came across that. I was like, No Night Without Stars. Why haven't I ever heard of this before? And I read it, and I'm like, holy shit, this is so Gamma World. Yeah. So yes, Gamma World.
Then they also mentioned Sterling Lanier's Hero's Journey. And Hero's Journey, like any good book about traveling across the irradiated wastes, has a map in it. That's one of the things I'm going to point out about Hero's Journey right off the bat. And I know we can't show it, but I love books that have maps. Like, when I was a kid, The Hobbit had a map showing how they got to the.
Oh yeah, you kind of keep track. You're like, you'll read about it, and you'll flip back to you'll hold your place and go to the front and be like, okay, where are they on the map?
Yeah, exactly. So, Hero's Journey is set in a post-nuclear world of mutants, and it's all the cool kind of mutants. It's our hero rides a Morse, which is a semi-intelligent telepathic moose that he can communicate with, and is his boon companion. Both his Rocinante and his Sancho Panza at the same time, because it's his partner in crime. There's a mutant bear that he runs into who he can communicate with telepathically, and has a whole society of mutant bears that are super smart. I kind of wonder if what's his name got the idea for
Benjamin Wallace.
Yeah, for the super smart bears, got it from Sterling Lanier's book.
Maybe
that's a whole thing that goes through multiple Doomsday Warrior novels. Is the super smart bears? He keeps coming back to that joke. But yeah, this is a world with like the giant monsters that live in Lake Michigan are seabirds. Like they're seabirds the size of fucking whales. Instead of and there's giant turtles the size of buses in the swamps, and killer otters at one point, lemutes, the lethal mutations, the horribly mutated wolverines and badgers, and it's Gamma World up one side and down the other.
Oh, isn't there also some kind of if I remember in the second book, there's like a giant like snail or slug that performs like surgery on him or something, if I remember correctly?
There is a giant slug that has somehow, through radiation, slowly, having been radiated at the beginning of the nuclear war, has now, through the course of thousands of years in its radioactive muck hole it lived in, become sentient and psychically powered and the whole nine yards. Yeah, absolutely.
Those two books are so Gamma World.
Hell, there's medieval style kingdoms where the knights are riding around on rabbits, giant rabbits as their mounts, rather than the Moors from up north in Canada. There's lost technology being used by a cryptic alliance of evil mutants. It's Gamma World up one side and down the other, and both books are. Both Hero's Journey and the sequel, The Unforsaken Hero. Yeah.
Well, the sequel didn't come out until like 84, I think. Something check. Like that.
Let me check. I got it right in front of me here.
I want to say 84. 83. I was close. So the second book didn't influence it, but the first one totally. I mean, and he's right. That first book totally influenced Gamma World, because it's like a lot of the stuff that happens in that is, well, in Gamma World they have giant riding rabbits.
Yeah, right. Exactly. The only thing that's missing is robots. I don't remember any robots.
No, neither do I.
There's no robots. There's some high-tech laser weapons and shit and electric guns and crap, but I don't remember any robots anywhere. But, apart from that would be the one thing that was missing. And God knows robots and artificial intelligence are not missing from No Night Without Stars. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's totally. So, yeah, those are huge influences.
If you're a fan of Gamma World at all, or if you're a fan of that kind of apocalypse, these are kind of must-haves. Do you, Mr. Wallace, want to take McDevitt's Eternity Road up?
I think we can. I was just looking at something real fast here.
Sure.
Basically, they call the giant riding rabbits hoppers.
Yeah.
In Gamma World, hoppers.
Yeah. And they might call them the same thing.
Yeah. So
now that you're saying it, I think it might actually be the exact same name in Unforsaken Hero.
Yeah. So that totally came from there. But yeah, those are very inspiring. And of course, Wizards. Wizards. Classic movie. But that one is definitely super. That one's way. That's like I think it's like a million years in the future or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
It's very over the top, very 70s. It's got magic, it's got technology. It's like not like it's mutations. It's basically magic. It's literally magic came back.
Elves, fairies, actual elves and fairies have come back to the earth. It's not that mutant humans look like elves and fairies. Nope, it's elves and fairies.
It's also fair. They were always there. They came back, but yeah, but there's a lot of heavy good stuff in that movie. It's such a classic movie. Here's one Mama never taught you.
Yeah, that is hands down. Sorry, the best mano a mano confrontation ever. Okay.
Yeah.
Any mano a mano confrontation where it's the big final battle and you just cheat. That's the best fucking option. That is always awesome. But it is great insofar as, I mean, who doesn't want mutant Nazis to mow down in the future? All right, you got to give them credit that the mutant Nazis were absolutely hilarious in Wizards.
Yeah, it's again. I mean, he did all that because he was trying to be very thought provoking on the subject matter with how they dug up all the propaganda and they tried to utilize what worked for the Nazi regime to take over the clean lands. Yeah,
Lebensraum. We must leave the land of scorch. Yes, it's like our people need Lebensraum. And one of the things that's sort of awesome about that was they dug up the weapons of war in Wizards that were giving them the high-tech advantage, but that couldn't win them the war. What they needed was the inspiration.
Yeah.
The Nazi, pomp and circumstance and ideology inspiration is what led to victories, not tanks and machine guns, And I thought that was a really interesting, that was always a really interesting idea, that ideology drives victory as much as technology or and the idea that ideology drives victory is also a very Nazi idea, that you can just win by the power of your will,
yeah,
and your belief. So it does provide, though, a world of robots and mutants and new races, which is very much a Gamma World thing, absolutely. Now, stuff that was not on that list, we did talk about a couple because we threw out the 2 extra Andre Nortons, but I wanted to throw out.
You said Eternity Road.
Yeah, Jack McDivitt's Eternity Road. Another thing Mr. Wallace put me onto, where it may not have crazy mutants, it's got everything else Gamma World asked for.
It's not super far future.
But it's AI.
But there is AI. It is, they call the people who, but it's, I think it's far enough in. I think I tried to, it may be 100 years or so, or 200 years.
I am positive when I cracked this thing open recently, because we had this back and forth, they were still talking about 1,000 years into the future.
Was it that far? I thought it was like a couple hundred. I could be wrong.
I want to say it was 1,000, but I'm gonna look and see if I can pull something out of here. But they do have super high technology. They have an AI that you run into in the story, and McDivitt wrote another story set in this same world that involved somebody coming across the ruins of a museum and activating a 3D hologram of Winston Churchill, which is this sort of limited AI that ends up telling the guy about the past, right?
Yeah, that was in a compilation. I read that. I can't remember.
I read it in Wastelands 2.
That's right.
A compilation of short stories.
Yep, I read it in there, and it was nice to get to kind of go back to that universe,
Yeah. And let's see, McDivitt wrote his copyright
late 90s.
Yeah.
98, 97.
97. Yep.
So yeah, I picked up on that one. Yeah, I probably picked up that one up around probably around 2000. That I wasn't aware of it till it came out, and I was just like, oh, this is a gem, They call the people who made the roads the road makers. That's who the ancients were. The ancients were the road makers because the roads were still there for the most part, because they made it out of some high-tech material that lasted the centuries. That's like one of the only things left. And part of the story is they're looking for this ancient depository of knowledge, because they kind of have like a medieval technology level society now, and they're trying to recapture the old technology. So there's these expeditions that some of the people, and they think they're crazy, they're going out to try to find these repositories of knowledge and bring
this
it back.
particular one is something called Polk's Fortress. Was that what it was called? It was like this citadel that they were looking for, this special repository in the face of the end times that was reputed to be out there, you know. Yeah, that's it. Abraham Polk is there is the legend that there was a character named Abraham Polk that created this repository of knowledge, and that they're on their way to try and track it down across, you know, post-apocalyptic North America. And they go from, like, I want to say, like, Texarkana, northern Louisiana, southern Arkansas, near the Mississippi, all the way up to
New England.
I want to say to New England by way of the Great Lakes. They bump up on the Great Lakes at some point, you know. And you know, at some point they find their way to a ruined city that the monorail is still working on. You know,
yeah.
the monorail or the train is still working.
And there's this one really, I'm not going to reveal, but there's this cool thing about a satellite facility.
Yes.
Not a satellite, but a satellite dish facility. Because I don't know, to me, seeing a large abandoned, you know, radio antenna just always, you know, screams apocalypse to me. I don't know why.
Oh yeah. Yeah, exactly. And again, this apocalypse was supposed to take place in the future. They find things on their travels like a sign that says "Established 2023," you know, on a plaque on the side of a building, a metal plate. The first merchant bank established 2023, Ann Arbor, Michigan. You know, so the apocalypse happens sometime after that. So it is in the future. So we do get some super high-tech stuff, but not a ton.
You know what? I'm just looking in the Wikipedia, and if this is right, in a post-apocalyptic North America where almost everyone was killed by a plague 1,700 years prior.
Ooh, 1,700 years. Okay. Yeah, so that's even more Gamma World than Gamma World.
Yeah.
As far as the time differences. You know, Gamma World's only a couple of hundred years after the apocalypse. And the apocalypse is a couple hundred years in the future. But 1,700 years is quite the stroll through time.
Yeah, because they're in the Mississippi Valley.
Yeah. And it certainly has the Gamma World feel of low-tech people exploring the high-tech world that's ruined. And they do a pretty good job of setting up hazards in this world.
Oh, yeah.
Ruins are the ruins are fucking dangerous for no other reason than rusty metal, collapsing buildings, trapped gas behind sealed doorways. Yeah.
Well, and there's not as much ruins as you would think because it's 1,700 years later. So nature has taken over a lot of space. So there are ancient ruins, but not as much as you think, because a lot of it's collapsed and been grown over already. You know?
Yeah, just piles of rubble that are now hills.
Yep.
You know.
So that's a good one. That's, if anything, it's a good read. You know.
It is one of the most superior post-apocalyptic reads I've ever. It's up there with Brin's The Postman for being just a really mature, well-organized, good story all the way down. It's one of the best. It's one of the best. It certainly doesn't have the big fleshy-headed mutants. Oh no, radiation has made me an enemy of society, you know, kind of mutants. There's none of that stuff, but there's dangerous tribes and there's dangerous environments, and it's a good exploration travelogue story.
It's a hex crawl, you know.
Yes, it is.
Hex crawl is a gaming term for the uninitiated.
Yeah. Where do you want to go after McDivitt? Because I got some Richard Corbin and Mutant World, which we named last time.
We talked about that last show. Richard Corbin, very good post-apocalyptic inspired stories. Mutant World, and he did the graphic illustration of A Boy and His Dog.
Which I guess A Boy and His Dog could count as Gamma Worldy, in that the dogs are all mutated, aren't they? And there's robots in the Down Under.
Yep, and there's the glowing was it like what
you're
they
right.
call them, the glowers or screamers? Screamers.
We should absolutely be including A Boy and His Dog, because there's crazy mutant screamers, there's giant spiders, there's weird colonies of people living in totalitarian societies inside bunkers. Yeah, I guess we should consider that Gamma Worldy. We really should.
That's very Gamma World. Thank you, Harlan Ellison. You know.
Yep. Now
the bastard of science fiction. You know.
Now, Mutant World. You know, everyone's even more mutated.
Yeah, that one's very Gamma World mutation type setting. You know, for sure.
Oh yeah. The characters become these twisted, distorted shapes with, sort of with Richard Corbin adding his artistic style to all these misshapen characters who are, the genetic disasters left over after, the war, mixed in with, high-tech weapons and crazy mutant creatures. My favorite being the egg.
Yeah.
The whole sequence with the horrible egg they're trying to get open because they think they're going to have an omelet. And it unzips like something out of the Aliens franchise. And instead of them eating the egg, the contents of the egg eats them.
Oh. And if we've never said it before, folks, our shows are constant spoiler alerts. We do reveal a lot of stuff. So Mutant World. Oh yeah. Pepe Moreno's Generation Zero and Rebel. Generation Zero is, probably, a decade or so after an apocalypse, and whereas Rebel is, I think Rebel's more dystopian, but it's kind of like a rundown dystopia.
Well, certainly,
it almost seems apocalyptic.
You tune in for the adventures in the ruined New York.
Yes. Which
is where most of the story takes place. It's urban dystopia in a free fire zone New York.
Yeah. But Generation Zero, fantastic graphic novel, which was serialized in Epic Magazine, starting back in, I want to say like April of 83, I think is when it started. April, May, maybe March. Serialized in Epic Magazine. And then later on, DC put it out as a compilation in, I think, around 90, 91, something like that.
That is correct.
But yeah, and, it's set like a decade maybe after it's, and it's got, some giant mutants. It's got, societies. It's got, it's not over the top Gamma Worldy, but it's definitely...
When you get to New York, there's some crazy robot running a cult of mutants, and they're all horribly, scarred and burned mutants. They're not the multi-limbed mutants, but they're looking like those guys living under New York in Beneath the Planet of the Apes. Speaking of Gamma Worldy things, Beneath the Planet of the Apes is a very Gamma World movie.
Yep. So, Generation Zero definitely got some good stuff in there. If anything, and also that came from Epic, that'll branch me off into Epic Magazine, which was put up by Marvel, for a limited, I think there was only like maybe, I want to say like 20 or 30 issues, which was sad because it was good. Epic was their answer to Heavy Metal. And Heavy Metal and Epic Magazine, huge Gamma World influences in those stories. Not all of them, but there is definitely some post-apocalyptic settings in those magazines. If you could get a hold of, I can't give you any specific issues right now, but there's a lot of post-apocalyptic little shorts in Epic Magazine and Heavy Metal. Because again, back in the early 80s when I was playing Gamma World, I read Heavy Metal, I read Epic Magazine, and it was just inspiring a lot of times just to even read that stuff. I mean, because I wasn't game mastering the game. My friend was, but just reading all these post-apocalyptic stories were awesome, because it just made me just feel great about playing,
Oh yeah, oh yeah, and Generation Zero, and it certainly Pedro Moreno's style. There's a couple others. What's the one? Bunker 6A.
Which is in a compilation called Zeppelin that he put out, which had a bunch of different war-related short stories. Oh, I remember. It says somewhere on the back of, maybe it's in Rebel somewhere, that his style of art, especially back in the '80s, they used to call it hyper violence. It's somewhere in the intro.
Wrong.
It's somewhere in the intro to one of those two. Maybe in Rebel they used to call it hyper violence, because a lot of his stuff was inspired by real pictures. Like, he'd have like real pictures, and he would do the kind of draw over it type of art.
Yes, almost like rotoscoping. Kind
of like a rotoscoping type, but not exactly. Because rotoscoping tended to be a little more. Well, no, they did rather color and rotoscoping, but
yes.
So just like I said, even just heavy metal and epic magazines, and then there was another one that somebody else put out. I can't remember who put. There's another one I can't remember what it was called, but those are very inspirational. Mm-hmm. And speaking of inspiration from magazines, you had the 2000 AD, the Progs, which were the paper magazines that came out weekly in England.
Good Lord. Yes.
So
how can we forget? How can we forget the Judge?
Judge Dredd was in 2000 AD, and Judge Dredd, The Cursed Earth. That was back when I was playing and I was reading those, because my local comic book store used to get the Progs in. They used to get them in from, I guess they had their distributor used to get them in from England.
Oh, so you wouldn't even have to wait for the compilations.
I was reading 2000 AD. I used to have a stack, like, I used to, up until about 10 years ago, I had a stack like probably like 10 inches thick of old Progs I used to read.
Wow.
I didn't get every one that they came out in order, but I read a bunch of them,
I got introduced to Judge Dredd by a friend of mine who loaned me compilations. One was an early Judge Dredd, compilation, and then there was the two-parter, The Cursed Earth.
Oh yeah, The Cursed Earth is, that is the archetype for, post-apocalyptic setting.
We got mutants with superpowers. We've got insane kingdoms in Lost City, like Las Vegas is its own kingdom where everything is settled with gambling. There was that whole McDonald's story where
which was left out in the original compilation, and it only came out in the reissue that they did about a year and a half ago.
Yeah, where there's this cult based on McDonald's, another cult based on Burger King. And because it's the British and it's years ago, they didn't worry about lawsuits from McDonald's and Burger King. They fucking called them out by name. Yep. They didn't describe it as McDougal's and Burger Queen, okay? They just called it out as, you fucking Americans with your fucking burgers. Yeah. Just went ahead and let us have it.
McDowell's.
Yes, McDowell's.
I have the golden arcs, but
I was very sorry to see that Sam Jackson doesn't get to come back in the new Coming to America movie.
He's not in it. We watched
just
it.
Every other goddamn person is, but not Sam Jackson does not come back as the armed robber. So he's moved on.
Disappointed in that.
And because we mentioned Judge Dredd's The Cursed Earth, I guess we have to mention Damnation Alley.
We should.
Because Damnation Alley
is what inspired The Cursed Earth.
Yeah, inspired The Cursed Earth. And that is, again, traveling from one side of America to the other in a sort of an on-the-road picture in their high-tech, land, the Deathlands Crossing war wag facing off against mutant horrors, insane weather, tornadoes the size of Kansas, warlords, the whole nine yards. The flaming rivers, collapsing bridges. Yeah, you gotta kind of throw Damnation Alley in there. It is science fantasy. You know what I mean? It's very much a science fantasy post-apocalyptic world. But I feel like that's another one that definitely, except of course, when we talk about the Cursed Earth and Damnation Alley, in Gamma World, there is no safe place like Mega City 1.
Nope.
There is no safe place like Texas City or Mega City 2. Everything, in fact, Gamma World looks like they blew up Mega City 1. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The technology of Judge Dredd looks like what was blown up to create Gamma World, which is another way that it makes for good inspiration.
Oh yeah, even though you have the mega cities, it's still just Judge Dredd was still felt very inspirational to me, because of some of the things they do, the high tech, but then they would have all these other things, like they would still have kind of mutants in the sewers, and they had all this other crazy ass stuff. So it still felt very inspiring.
Not to mention the whole thing in Judge Dredd, where because all citizens' needs are met, people engage in all these things in the megacities to distract themselves, to entertain themselves. So politics becomes this sport. People adopt extreme lifestyles or become involved in block wars.
The block wars, because they're bored.
Yeah. So they just decide that the people from the next, housing complex, are their mortal enemies and have to die. In the same way that people have riots at soccer fields. Now they're having, riots over, I want to say the very first block war one was something like John Wayne block versus Groucho Marx block. The blocks were named after celebrities or something. And I can't remember what what the blocks were called, but I really recall one of them was John Wayne block.
Yeah, that probably sounds about right. It's but yeah, this is how influential it was. It was in a second or third Gamma World campaign, like probably later 80s, like the last Gamma World campaign I played in with my friend. This was around 85, 86 was probably the last one. It was generally me and my friends, and so it was me, and we'd have a couple of NPCs. So one of the NPCs was he just sometimes just took things right out of the books, but we had Spikes Harvey Rotten was a character, because my friend used to also draw too, so he looked like Spikes Harvey Rotten. There was a character that looked whose name was Drock, and
yes, from the curse word, from the fake curse word that they use in Mega City 1.
And that character, the original drawing, was kind of primitive, but then the second one was more inspired by the 2000 AD stainless steel rat character, James Boulevard de Gris. It looked like him, but his name was still Drock. We had a character named Stronium Dog, and he looked like Stronium Dog. So yeah, sometimes there was no mincing the plagiarism in our Gamma World campaign.
If you're gonna steal from the best. There wasn't anyone named Hell Tanner, was there?
No, not in any of the games we played, but we would have continued. There could have been. So those magazines are influential. Like we talked about Thundar the Barbarian.
Gotta mention Thundar. Thundar is, again, like we said, Gamma World up one side and down the other.
Oh yeah, vibro swords and magic, because the magic could really be just mutations. If you want to look at it that way.
Considering that the mutations in Gamma World were basically there to fill in for magic.
Yep.
In D&D, why not? Plus robots, lasers, all kinds of high-tech gadgets and whatnot. Huge mutants of all makes and models. Gamma World. Its connection to Thundar is undeniable. Everything you need to know about Gamma World is in Thundar, and vice versa. It's one of the great inspirations for a Gamma World style campaign. Again, hundreds of years, centuries after the end, this is what the world looks like.
I think even in the intro, does it even say it's 1,000 years in the future? Does it say, or no?
Oh, in the Gamma World, in the Thundar opening,
maybe.
I want to say it is. I want to say 1,000 years from now. But that's
something like that.
Yeah. It might as well be. Hell, there's 2 pieces of moon floating around up there.
Oh yeah. And back to books a little bit. Some more Gamma World inspired. There was a story that I told you about because when you brought up the hologram in the McDivitt short story, reminds me of a story that I read, which came out way before that. I think this story probably came out in like the 70s. Vault of Ages. But I can't remember the author.
It's ringing a bell, but I'm not.
I can't, folks. I can't remember the book is called Vault of Ages. I think I don't remember, but it's basically, they've gone down to medieval society, and cities of the ancients are taboo.
Paul Anderson.
Paul Anderson.
Vault of the Ages
are off limits, but the thing is, they're trying to find this. They know there's these vaults there that hold like ancient technology, and there's this part of the story where they're in this ancient city, and these guys are hiding out somewhere because like they're being hunted down, and they're in basically the ruins of a old museum, and the old museum had holograms that were semi-intelligent. Like they were kind of pre-programmed, and they even let them know, but they still had they were like semi-intelligent, AI that, knew stuff, and like they're like it's talking, it's like they're talking to the AI. He's like, oh no, I can't go past here and there, and he's talking to him. So that's very kind of Gamma worldy right there.
Oh my God, yes. Oh my God, absolutely. Again, they blew up the future. That's sort of key to Gamma World. It's one of the reasons why I always connected Gamma World to the Fallout series, because they blew up the future as opposed to, the present.
Oh yeah. Well, we didn't even talk about, we've talked about Fallout a bazillion times, and
yeah,
it's
certainly we'll just throw in, yes, it's a Gamma World. If you want some Gamma World action, Fallout does it. It's why I recommended the original Fallout games to Jared was, dude, this is a taste of Gamma World. It's a small taste, but it's still a taste of Gamma World.
It's very, if we had to, pick a modern Gamma World game, it's it's really, it's X amount of years after there was high tech. There was, it was kind of like, that 50s, view of the future,
yeah,
which is how the original Gamma World feels, like that kind of 50s view of the far future.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I have not read Vault of Ages, but as we're sitting here talking, I am, adding it to my wish list so that I can scoop up a copy of it.
It's an okay story. It's not too bad. I'd found it like on PDF somewhere. Like I got it like as a an e-reader version, and read that one cool. a few years ago. But yeah, no, they're so. I mean, we could talk for hours about Gamma World, Gamma World inspirations, and we'll probably have to do another.
I want to throw out two last titles before we call this one an ending. And you gotta include Robert Heinlein's Orphans of the Sky.
Oh yes.
Yes, it is absolutely Metamorphosis Alpha. Okay? It's a generation ship gone bad, and the people in the generation ship no longer think of the ship as a ship, they think of it as the entire universe. There's nothing beyond the ship. And it's a world where the passengers on the ship who are forced to live, I want to say close to the people who are living close to the zero gravity.
I think closer to the outer edges of the hull, I think, right?
Yeah.
Because they're more exposed to radiation.
Yeah. There are mutations amongst the crew. And one of the main characters in the story is Joe Jim, who is a two-headed mutant who is sort of, a...
Orlean. He's an Orlean.
Well, he doesn't have 4 arms.
He's close enough.
But he's got, he's the guy who's got 2 heads, 2 different personalities. He can work all his limbs. He cooperate, but the heads talk and cooperate together. Yeah, that is a full-on... that's a full-on Gamma World mutation. And his right-hand man, Bobo, is like, short, microcephalic, tiny little head, and super strong arms and shit, and is a lethal killer, even though he's got the IQ of a baseball bat. Again, that feels like Gamma World, where he got a defect mutation, but he also got, an advantage mutation. That feels very Gamma World as well. So you got to include Orphans of the Sky. And the last one I want to throw out is this insane Philip Jose Farmer story, Dark as the Sun, which is set on an Earth that has had so many rises and falls of civilization that although man is living in an age of tribalism with painted faces and loincloths and blow darts and spears, that's how we're living now. Sometime in the past, mankind had enough technology to move the Earth so that the Earth would not be eaten by the sun when it went through its red giant phase. And then civilization collapsed. And then civilization rose again over millions of years. And human civilization then proceeded to fucking move the Earth, ignite Jupiter, and leave the solar system with our own miniature solar system. Kind of like how Larry Niven has the puppeteers leaving the galaxy in their own mobile solar system in the Ringworld novels. There's this thing where you encounter the puppeteer civilization having constructed an artificial solar system with an artificial sun and artificial planets orbiting it, or planets that they've moved into it to orbit, that is leaving the galaxy at almost the speed of light, where it's starting to redshift, where on one side of the solar system everything's blue and on the other side everything's red because of the way that the wavelengths of light are being shifted by its transit out of the galaxy. Mankind rose to those levels and crashed. So the technology that's spread around this world is massively magical. But how it's used in the story is just fascinatingly Gamma World. They find what is essentially a flying airship, kind of like a bubble car from Gamma World, that at the touch of a button folds up into the size of a briefcase, right? And if you push the button, it unfolds into the size of basically, a Hercules transport aircraft. But since they don't know how to make it fly, all they ever do is use it for a hut.
Which is sad.
Well, a hut that they can pick up and carry with them. But anytime they want to stop, they have a hut that they can seal off from the elements, and then they're perfectly safe, And during the course of their travels, they encounter, a almost death machine-like robot that falls into their party. They encounter a centaur-like creature, a giant centaur-like creature that's mostly made out of plant material and vegetation, that has evolved on Earth in the meantime. Earth is heading into the heat death of the universe. Mankind got good enough to preserve Earth in a manner by, having Earth leave the solar system with its own sun made out of Jupiter. Earth could do that, but at some point, the heat death of the universe is going to consume everything. And so part of what the story is about trying to find a way through another dimension or through a time portal back to the beginning, so that they can survive the end of the universe, the opposite of the Big Bang. But this thing has got all kinds of wild mutations. It's got colonies of people they call witches who have learned to use the old technology. And so because they can use the old technology, they're referred to by the savages as witches. The plethora of mutant powers and mutant creatures, very Gamma World. And the same thing with the technology. There's a point where they find this building, and I've read it a couple times, and I just cannot figure out what the fuck is going on. But they look inside this building, and the giant statue, right, that's in the building that they can't get into, they can just look through the windows. There's a giant statue, kind of like, like the Abe Lincoln in the Lincoln Memorial in Logan's Run, except it's Statue of Liberty sized or bigger. And instead of those figures, it's motherfucking Santa Claus. It's motherfucking Santa Claus on this giant pedestal carved by a lost civilization, 2 or 3 lost civilizations ago, that it just doesn't make any sense, right? Except that you can recognize it as Santa Claus.
Yeah, the thing with I mean, yes, in that setting, a lot of those things seem very Gamma World-ish, but it's just the only thing that I have issue with is that it's like, well, it's like millenniums and upon millenniums in the future, and the society has risen, collapsed multiple times.
Yeah.
You know,
it's far worse than that. They literally say 15 billion years from now.
Oh, okay.
And here's the deal: humans have not evolved, and I ain't buying that. That's the one thing that I just couldn't buy was humans have changed not one shred
in 15 billion years.
15 billion, and we've only been around for what, 2 million? 2 million. From hunched over hairy Australopithecine to this has been 2 million years. Apparently, in 15 billion, we don't so much as get taller, shorter, get better hearing, get worse hearing. It's weird. That part, like we're cockroaches. Like we're so perfect, we can't stand to be improved.
None of these books, a lot of these books aren't perfect. We know that, But folks, these, we're just scratching the surface on things that inspired or have inspired or are still inspiring us for Gamma World. There's so much more that we could talk about. But we tried to hit on some of the higher level stuff, like stuff that really stands out to us, stuff that really we come back to again and again and again, And there's a lot of minor stuff out there, that we could talk about more, and we'll probably talk about it more at some point. But this right now, I think, was a lot of the high end stuff. Some of it you may be familiar with, some of maybe new to you folks, which is good, because I've had people make comments about how I've seen and learned and read so much new stuff from listening to you guys, because that's what we're here to do. We're here to bring new things to people's interests, who are interested in the apocalypse.
And good God, I was going to say By the Waters of Babylon. Did you have to read that in high school? By the Waters of Babylon? Was that required reading back in the 80s?
Are you talking about Last Babylon or By the Waters of Babylon?
By the Waters of Babylon.
No, but I have read it. It's on my shelf. It's not a big book, but
no.
I don't remember a whole lot about it. But we're not going to get into that because we're
run out of time.
We have run out of time.
This is our new discipline. I hate it.
I know, because I don't want to have 1.5, 2-hour shows anymore. The vaults are getting ready to close, so we have to rush back in. But again, folks, like I said, we'll talk about this stuff some more. We'll have a part 2 to this. But again, these are just some of the things that stuck at the top of our brains really quick, because these are things that we constantly think of. So that's going to be it for this episode, folks, of Gamma World Inspirations. And we'll talk about some more Gamma World Inspirations, and maybe we'll do a more closer apocalypse type inspirations for things like Twilight 2000.
Oh yes,
things like that. We could definitely go into things that will inspire, more short-term apocalypses, things that aren't so far in the future. So we could talk about that too. What's going to be at our next episode? I don't know yet. We're just getting warmed up again. So these are our first 2 episodes, and we'll figure out what we're going to do next. But as always, folks, we appreciate your time. Thank you for being here. Just, be safe out there in the wastelands, folks. So again, thank you, and good night. And as I said, we will see you in the wastelands.
Good eating.
This episode of Podcast at Ground Zero has been brought to you by Hobo Soup. Hobo Soup, when you have to make do with what you got. Now available in apocalypse size. Keep up to date with us by visiting podcastatgroundzero.com and subscribe to the blog via email.